Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the OC Forum today. Today's special program is about working and thriving. Is brought to you by our special sponsors, UCI and UCI Health. My name is Gregory Scott. I am the President and CEO of Community Action Partnership of Orange County. I have the pleasure of leading this conversation, I guess serving as your moderator today for today's discussion. So tune in, buckle your seats. It's going to be an amazing, amazing conversation. But let me tell you a little bit about Community Action Partnership. For over 50 years, Community Action Partnership has been the champion in Orange County, providing people with immediate solutions to help them find their way out of poverty. We not only help people and communities survive by addressing their basic needs, but we also help them thrive by empowering them through our advocacy, our education programs, our job services programs. We have an array of different services that we are really helping people come up with a process to really help them come out of poverty and thrive in the society. It's no secret that the global pandemic has fundamentally altered all of our lives, and especially employment here in California. When people think about looking for work, they're no longer seeking a job just to pay their bills. So more and more, we're seeing employees search for jobs that foster a healthy work-life balance, something we've always been talking about, something that's going to offer them a livable wage. Ultimately, they want to provide a real clear path to their success. While these demands embody the essential California dream job, many job seekers have reported of being unable to find employment anywhere that's going to really supply them what they want as it relates to this work-life balance. Employers, on the other hand, had expressed difficulty being able to find people to fill vacant jobs that despite countless job posting and recruitment efforts, they still have jobs that are open. So now you can see we have a problem. You have employees who are unable to find the right job, and you have employers who have vacant positions that are open. How do we connect these two dots? What are some of the solutions to address this problem, this obstacle that come with offering this California dream job? Today, we invited a panel of business leaders. In this case, I'm having a conversation with a special person that will share her insight and help us explore some of these vital solutions to these issues. So let me introduce you to Catherine Florman. She is the president of HR Consulting Help. Catherine, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Catherine,
Right.
I want to thank you for joining us today, and I want you to take a few minutes just to introduce yourself to our audience before we get started.
Sure. Happy to. So I've got over 25 years of HR experience, including running HR departments in multiple industries, from manufacturing, healthcare, publishing, travel and tourism, just name a few of the industries that I've been in. So I've got a broad band of experience in different industries and at different companies, small size companies to larger companies. And so my company does HR support and help for small to mid-sized businesses or for on a per project basis. And so we've been working a lot with recruitment as well and have experienced the same challenges that you've mentioned, Gregory. And so I'm happy to have that discussion today.
Well, awesome, awesome. Well, I am excited to engage this conversation with you today, and like in your industry and what you're seeing, and we want to kind of explore some things that you're seeing. But I've been watching TV, and I'm seeing across the board, whether it's on CNN or MSNBC or even on YouTube, people are talking about the Great Resignation. So, Catherine, you get to work with several companies, and I'm sure you've seen your share of recruitment challenges, successes, and sometimes failures. Can you give us a glimpse of what you're seeing in the marketplace today? What would you say are the biggest challenges employers are experiencing right now?
Just even getting applicants, regardless of what industry it is, we're seeing that, for example, positions that you would maybe get 100 applicants for previously, we get 10. And no matter which type of positions they are. And then of those 10, a lot of them are not qualified applicants, like they don't have the experience for the job. So the sheer volume of applicants coming in has dropped as well as the quality of applicants. And then what the applicants are seeking versus what the job offers. There's also been sort of a disconnect in that place. So that's been very challenging for employers. So it then takes even longer to fill the position, right? So you've got positions that are open that and then those that are working are having to take on extra work because those positions are vacant. So it's sort of a cyclical effect that impacts not just the open positions, but the whole organization.
Wow. Wow. Tell me a little bit about you mentioned the disconnect in terms of what potential employees are looking for. What are some of the things you're hearing that they are looking for that certain jobs are not able to offer them?
Right, absolutely. So one is remote work. So with the pandemic, a lot of positions went remote. Those that could go remote went remote for the most part. And although there's some companies that have decided to permanently go remote, right? There are those that only temporarily went remote, that the positions don't work as well being remote, or they want to have them on site.
Hmm.
So in those situations, you get a lot of employees that really liked the remote status because of it really work-life balance, their family, they got the time back from commuting,
Right.
that it doesn't work for the environment that they're trying to go into for recruiting for those employers.
Hmm.
So that tends to be a great disconnect. And some employers have adjusted it where they can. So those that originally didn't want remote, let's say it was a tech position that could be done remote, they've
Hmm.
now had to adjust and say, okay, now we're going to accept some remote positions. But if you've got something like it's a, let's say, manufacturing environment, you
Right.
have to be on site.
Right.
These hospitality industries, you got to be on site. There aren't really functions for remote work. So that's been one of the areas that's been a big disconnect is that piece.
Wow. That's important too because I remember when we first went into, it was almost 2 years ago,
Mhm.
to the day that March of 2020, we all, heard the alarm and we're now in this new environment as it relates to work. But if you would have asked me 3 years ago, 4 years ago, would I let the lion's share of my employees work from home? I would have said no. There's no way. We are a people business and we have to be in front of people and there's no way we can be successful and not do that. But obviously, given the pandemic, it changed my thinking as a leader. And we were still able to do some things we couldn't do remotely. We have a warehouse which is similar to a manufacturing company where we had to be there and do the things we need to do. So we had to be in present. But other parts of the organization were able to work from home, and we were able to do some things through video, through Facebook Live. A lot of different areas where we were able to do through Zoom. A lot of different things that we were able to create kind of our muscle in a way that we didn't think we had before. So my question, Catherine, is how much of this, in terms of CEOs or employers being open or changing their mindset and being creative about working from home, for some positions, do you think that's possible, or and are people starting to think about that more?
Yeah, I do think it is possible, and there's a couple factors go into place there. Is one, some people can do remote jobs and are very, very highly productive, and there's those where they might think it's a match for them, but it doesn't work for those people. So there's going to be a certain percentage that don't work out in that way.
Hmm.
But there are tools available for, let's say, sometimes the wisdom comes from a CEO or a leader saying, hey, how do I know they're really working? Right? I can walk by their desk and I can see they're working. How do I know if they're really working? Well, there are different sort of auditing tools that you can get that are fairly inexpensive where it actually does tracks productivity, right? Especially if you've got somebody who's maybe a remote call center or you something where you've got metrics that you can capture.
Right.
There are systems that do that, and there's some large companies that have that software, which makes it where they can actually see are people getting the job done, they're being successful. So
Wow.
there are things that can be in place to create some comfort there. The other part, I think, we had to go to remote automatically without giving managers the tools on how to do that. So we've got great tools like Zoom and different sort of video conferencing, but how many managers have been trained on how to supervise staff remotely,
Right.
right?
That's right.
And so there's tools that need to happen for that. How do we keep people engaged when they're remote? So
Right.
I was speaking to a business owner just recently, and they were talking about that one of the areas that they were having challenges with is that connection piece, right? So
Hmm.
I asked the question, how often do you do actual video? Do you see the person? Well, we do it on occasion, but most of the time it's over the phone.
Yeah.
Well, you need to have at least a certain amount of time that you're doing virtual face to face. Otherwise, people don't feel that connection. So there's
Hmm.
some simple things you can do like that. And then how you manage people remotely when it comes to their time, right? So I think there needs to be that gap sort of needs to be filled a little bit
Hmm.
on doing some training for people on how to keep employees engaged, how to manage performance remotely, what you can do so that both parties feel like this is a good match and it's successful.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I have a question that I'm sure is the top of my head, something I'm thinking about right now in the moment. So I hope it doesn't throw you off too much.
Right.
One of the things that I've observed over over this period of dealing with the pandemic is a lot of, especially here in Orange County, one thing we've witnessed is a lot of the service industry jobs, like restaurants, like hotels. Who would have thought Disney was going to shut down? Like,
Yep. True.
again,
Yeah.
if you'd have told me that 2 years ago, there's no way Disneyland is going to shut down, but they did. A lot of hotels, shut down. A lot of restaurants shut down and never recovered. For those individuals who worked in the service industry and some of those jobs are no longer there, what do you think employers can do, or what can we do as a community to help those individuals upskill? What I mean by that, how do we prepare them for the future of jobs if their current job, if they're in the service industry, is no longer available or is no longer there, or they think about a career choice? What are some options out there for those individuals?
That's a really good question. When we think about, let's say, the workforce centers for unemployment, there's places there you can go get skill training and that sort of things. But I think having more publicized of where people can get skill-based learning for free or for minimal cost.
Hmm.
Like LinkedIn has LinkedIn Learning where you can watch different videos, you can get some training like that.
Great
Some
idea.
community colleges have some classes that are available, and there's some things that are just free. For example, if you go on YouTube, I'm happen to have advanced Excel skills, but there's times where I think, oh, how do I do that formula or something? You can find almost anything on YouTube when it comes to things like that of how to actually learn different software. So there are some free things out there or low cost that are available. So I don't know where you would post that, right? But if there was a place where people knew to go to find and learn other resources that don't cost them a lot of money, because if
Mhm.
someone's unemployed, a $20 cost might be too much for them,
Right.
because they're trying to feed themselves. So I think
Right.
there's ways like that to be able to switch industries. There's also um, different internship programs that people can get into that are paid internships, right? Now, a lot of
Yep.
times they're connected to colleges, but if it's a paid internship, then
Hmm.
it doesn't have to necessarily be connected to a college. But the employer has to be willing to do some of that on-site training, right? Giving them the training for the skills for the job. And we're seeing more and more that we're needing to do more of that, of taking completely unskilled labor, even for unskilled labor positions, to show them things like you mentioned Amazon, right? A lot of their entry jobs are unskilled labor.
Right.
But when someone's been doing it for a while, they get faster and better at it. We
Yep.
have to remember that when people come into any job, they've got to learn the job. And it might take more time to train them in a skill they don't know
Yep.
initially than you would previously, but it'll save time in that having that position vacant and open for months on end, right? So I think more time needs to go into investment and
Hmm.
training people on the job, as well as making sure that you're checking back with them that they have everything they need to do their job, that they understand what the requirements are, and that
Hmm.
they've got enough skill training. And sometimes we forget to loop back and do that.
Yeah. Love that answer. Love that answer. You brought up something that sparked my thought a little bit, which was you talked about investment, not only investing and training individuals, because ultimately, when you're training individuals and you are doing a lot of development of your team development, the expectation is that there's going to be a rate of return at the end of that training and end of that development as they learn and ups and they learn new skills.
Mhm,
Another great debate that's out there is centered around the livable wage.
mhm,
And I know it's something that our organization has been dealing with, and we actually ensured, about a year ago, that all of our staff were at least making a living wage, which is a little over $22 an hour. And so I've heard, both sides of this debate. So while we have in the Great Resignation, we also having this great debate, around around livable wage, especially in a place like Orange County. What are some of your thoughts around a livable wage, and what do you think some of the challenges would be for some of the employers out there?
Absolutely, I can tell you there's a lot of challenges around it. We've seen it actually with the minimum wage going up in California every year, right? Employers have had to adjust to that new minimum wage, and in some cities, right, the minimum wage is higher than the state. So you've
Hmm.
got cities that are next to each other that might have one has the state minimum wage, one has the city, so that they're competing for the same talent.
Hmm.
So one of the challenges is the cost of doing business, right? So if you bring someone to a livable, let's say they're at $15 an hour, and you bump people up to $22 an hour,
Yeah.
goods and services will need to go up proportionately.
Yeah.
Otherwise, a lot of these businesses can't survive. They might
Right.
be able to take a lower profit margin, but they still have to have a profit margin to exist.
Yeah.
And then the other part that comes into play is we've already got it happening with this minimum wage increase is
Hmm.
internal compression. So when you've got where the minimum wage goes up in the state, and so let's say you've got an employee who's making $2 more than minimum wage, that's an existing employee, but you're
Hmm.
having to now pay $3 more just to get new talent in, right?
Right.
So then now you're paying new people more than your existing staff, and people talk about their wages, and they're allowed to, in California. So those people get upset because, "Look, I've been loyal to you. I've worked here a long time.
Right.
How come either I'm the same rate as somebody new or they're getting more?"
Right.
So that it becomes really a financial balancing act on how do you bring up wages so that it's a livable wage, but also the company can still be profitable. So there's gotta be an adjustment that occurs as well in the cost of goods and services. So then that livable wage just keeps having to go up higher because now your goods are costing more, right? So it's a delicate sort of balancing act where I think for some industries it's easier to do than others. I noticed I was at a restaurant, the service industry, and they actually had it in small print at the bottom that there was additional 4% added to the bill for the cost of uh, COVID, time off, and that sort of thing. And that was
Wow.
in small print at the bottom. But the first thing I thought about, Gregory, was how much of that is going to the employee? In other words, is the business taking the 4%, or is that actually going? How much of that is going to the wages of the service staff? So I think different businesses have done different things to sort of adjust, but it's a difficult challenge that employers face because most employers that I work with certainly want to pay more, but they've got to be able to still have a viable business at the same time.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's one of the challenges we face too. You mentioned about the internal compression, and so we couldn't do it all at one time, so we had to kind of do it in phases, have a real strategic plan, and a real strategy on how to do it in phases. But we took the first step of being able to do it, and then we got to deal with the compression issue. So I totally understand. I think that's an issue that we got to continue to talk about in future opportunities like this, when we have a chance to really talk about it with other leaders who are running companies. And it's hard. It's hard to do it. Even though it may be the right thing, it still may be hard to do. So I think there's a
And,
lot of opportunity for us to learn from one another as we move forward.
And I've actually, when I've done that, I've done it in a phased way as well. And like whether it's minimum wage change or anything else, is for your internal staff. Look at your most long term staff and
Yeah,
the ones that had the least amount of variance between the new people coming in and the existing staff. And those are the people you really want to adjust first. You've got a 20-year employee
yeah,
that's making $2 less than $2 more than somebody that new that's coming in.
yeah,
Those are the people you got to adjust
yeah,
first.
yeah. That's a major problem. And again, a lot of we had to deal with it, but a lot of employees, a lot of businesses, that's an issue that's real, and the issue that they have to deal with to so it doesn't negatively impact them going forward. So that's a real question. So I'm looking forward to future conversations around that. Catherine, another question for you. As we talk about kind of how businesses can thrive here in California, obviously, even our last question about it was really about taking care of our employees. How do we take care of our employees, who, from my perspective, are probably our most precious commodity when it comes
Hmm.
to business? No people, no business. But we want them both to succeed. We want the people to succeed. We want the business to succeed. What do you think are some real solutions that we can offer to help businesses really thrive, while also meeting the new demands or new needs of employees? We're working remotely, work life balance, livable wage. I mean, we can go down the list of what the needs of the employees are, while also making sure that businesses thrive. What do you think are some real solutions to solve that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that's come up a lot more recently, right, not only with COVID, but also with some of the millennials, it's important to them as well, is that this work-life balance, but that which includes a lot of time off for vacation. So
Hmm.
vacation, you give a lot of weeks of vacation, it's a cost of the business, right? It's vacation liability. So that's a cost of the business. So we're seeing more and more companies go to unlimited time off or unlimited vacation time or time away. And what that does is it's a instead of like 2 weeks off, it would be that you've got this vacation time. You ask for it off as long as other people don't have the same days or something. The manager approves it, and as long as it's a balance of being able to get the work done and plan ahead, then they can have that time off.
Hmm.
And I'm seeing a lot of startups do that, especially that are
Hmm.
to attract a lot of talent. And
Hmm.
so, and then, but they do it since California has the paid sick leave law, they carve out sick time separate so that they accrue that separately. But for the vacation time and personal time, it's unlimited time off. So what that does is it gives more flexibility, especially somebody who's got years of experience in another company that has 4 weeks of time off coming to a new company doesn't want to take 2 weeks, right? So unlimited helps work for that, especially for exempt or salaried positions,
Hmm.
and gives more flexibility while also creating less cost of the business because since you're not accruing that time off, you don't have as a vacation liability. But you just
Right.
have to be careful how you structure your unlimited policy, and you certainly want to have legal counsel look at your policy to make sure that it doesn't in any way conflict with the be considered any sort of earned wages when it comes to wage and hour. So that's one trend that we're seeing a lot of. Another one is when it comes to vacation is vacation buyout.
Mm.
And that's where let's say you've got 2 weeks of vacation as an employee. You have to wait another 5 years to get 3 weeks. The employee can choose to buy an extra week of vacation. So they have it deducted from their check. It's spread across, each pay period. So it's not very much cost to them, but they get an extra week off.
Mhm.
And that can actually fall under a cafeteria plan if it's set up the right way. So it's a
Mhm.
pre-tax benefit at the same time. So there are some sort of creative ways that you can create more work-life balance and more opportunity that way. And then the other pieces are really about keeping employees engaged and interested and wanting to be there, and being passionate about the business that they're connected to. So a lot of times, when I look at what employers do to bring somebody on board, for example, they do a good job of maybe paperwork, the onboarding part of paperwork,
Mhm.
but have they really done a good job of getting somebody onboarded to learn the business, to learn
Mhm.
their position really well, and then what we call inboarding, which is that continuous employee engagement with them to make sure that they're getting their needs met. A lot of times we stop after the paperwork piece is done, right?
Mhm.
And here's your job, and then we're not connecting with them as much.
Wow.
Consistent messaging is important from leadership all the way down.
Mhm.
And because if you've got your leader saying one thing and your supervisor saying something else,
Yeah,
then people don't trust sort of the environment that they're in.
that's
And
right.
we've found that with this environment, especially, people need to trust the company that they work for as much as we have to trust them to do a good job.
That's right.
So those are a few things to just kind of keep in mind, right? I mean, how often do people do an engagement survey to
Mhm.
see sort of the pulse of their employees, right?
Right.
And you have to have a base to go by. So if you've never done an employee survey, that
Mhm.
first one, if you do it on a consistent basis,
Mhm.
gives you a baseline to know if you've improved in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So there's ways you can create value for both the company and the employee. You just have to be a little bit more creative about it.
So, Catherine, I really appreciate you offering your insight on this important topic today. I know that we are only just beginning. This is just the beginning of a long conversation. We're really just scratching the surface. But as we always know, we never have enough time. We only get a little bit of time to save the world. But I think you've already shared a lot of great nuggets, golden nuggets. That's going to be great takeaways for people. And we'll certainly continue this conversation at upcoming programs in April. But before we end, I want to ask you if there's one thing that you can do to save the California dream job. all the challenges we talked about, working in a different environment, working in this new environment, all of that. But what can we do? What can you offer the audience? What's one thing that we can do to save the California dream job?
That's a great question, actually, and I think we need to plan ahead a little bit on that. In that the the wages are going to continue to need to go up because the cost of living is going up here. And if we don't make those adjustments in the near future, we're going to be losing more and more talent going out of state to
Hmm.
get jobs elsewhere. And the and then also a lot of employers already are starting to for remote jobs to seek talent outside of California so they can pay less. Like in other states with their minimum wage and that sort of thing. But I think companies need to really plan for the future. You and I talked about how it takes a phased approach typically to be able to adjust wages
Yes.
is to think about the future and the wages and plan for that in your budgets
Hmm.
on doing a phased approach to getting people to a livable wage and also being able to plan what changes you need to do to your business so you can still be a viable business, right? But it's going to have to be phased and people need to plan for it. Otherwise, they'll be in a place where there's no talent available that'll uh, be willing to take the wages that you're wanting to pay. That's already happening right now. So it'll
Hmm.
just continue to get worse if we can't make some adjustments.
Wow. Wow, Catherine, you have wowed me today, and I really appreciate engaging this conversation with you on this very important topic that we're certainly going to continue. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. When we come back, we'll continue with another conversation. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
At UCI, we believe in the infinitely curious. We believe in the courageous of thought, the ones willing to fail again and again until one day they don't. When you have the courage to see things differently, to see opportunity where others see impossibility, amazing things will happen. At UCI, we stop at nothing to change the world, to save lives, and deliver the extraordinary.
Welcome back to the OC Forum. If you are just tuning in, my name is Natalie Rubacava, Chief Operating Officer for the Orange County Business Council, and I will be leading the second half of today's discussion. The Orange County Business Council is the leading voice of business here in Orange County. We represent business working with academia and government to ensure high quality of life in this region. Some of our major priorities are focused on generating jobs here in this area, which is a great leadway into our discussion today. Earlier in our program, we discussed employment in California and how job seekers are asking for more work-life balance and a livable wage to support themselves. Joining me today is Isabel Bart, Director of the Small Business Development Center at UCI Beale Applied Innovation. Thank you for being here today. Isabel, before we begin, could you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Natalie, for having me today. So I'm currently the director of the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center at UCI Beale Applied Innovation. To give a little bit of background, we belong to the Orange County Inland Empire SBDC region. We have 9 centers. UCI Beale Applied Innovation is one of the 3 tech centers alongside with Launchpad and UC Riverside. We typically work with a lot of tech startups, a lot of other centers to help retail businesses and others. So each SBDC center in the region is a little bit different. In my past, I've held a lot of different type of roles, including in corporate America for many years. I was working in marketing function of a medical device company, and then an association of nurses, also in marketing and communications, before joining the SBDC, and previously also led the operations for a social impact incubator. So I got a chance to see the corporate environment, but also worked more in the last years with a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and jump into some of the questions that we have prepared. So in our previous conversation, we talked about how some people are calling this period the Great Resignation due to the high number of employees leaving their jobs for better opportunities or because they are just simply burnt out after this past couple of years that we've had with the pandemic. What are your thoughts on this current situation where people are leaving their jobs or employers are just unable to fill positions that are currently open?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, this is actually a topic that I'm passionate about. In spite of, you see, the tragedy that COVID was from a public health standpoint, I do think that a positive side, if we can call it that way, is that it really reinvented the way we work, and I believe that is for the better. That's what I'm optimistic about the future of the workforce and the workplace environment, providing even greater flexibility. Once we were able to address equity issues with potential access to technology during that period of the pandemic where many of us were confined, which I think was a challenge early on, I do think that each of us as human beings, we got to really understand our priorities and our values, right? And for many of us, that may have meant, well, what's really critical might be, things like spending time with family, with kids, maybe parents, and being able to, have the flexibility of working, if not from home, at least with a hybrid model where you can maybe do some of the things that you were not able to do before in a 9 to 5 office jobs, because when you're working from home, taking breaks may be easier, grabbing some food may be easier. And I kind of speak for myself as well. I was a little bit also a product of the Great Resignation, in the sense that when COVID happened at first, I was actually considering a transition to a more entrepreneurial position, which I ended up landing, and I'm happy about that. But I also actually survived breast cancer in 2020, the same year. And that also obviously made me really reflect on my priorities and how I want to do work. Personally, I have some family overseas. I grew up in Europe, and maybe, the thought of having a more flexible way to work, or doing the work I do from a different place, or maybe visiting my family and my parents, started becoming more of a possible reality for me than it ever was before, because I grew up, like probably many of our viewers, in a more traditional environment. I went to business school, got a degree, and really thought I had to be in an office all day to do business and work with my team. It really never occurred to me that I would be working like this one day, right? 5 years ago, I think, like all of us. So I do think that, there's a combination of factors. I think also, in convergence with this change in society, besides the pandemic, that's also that the fact that people are more purpose driven, whether it's consumers when we go buy products, or the younger generation who also wants to do good in the world, and they are very motivated by very different things that we may have been 10-20 years ago. So I think in addition of that, this sense of purpose has really come out for many of us, and I think it kind of spiraled into what we call now the Great Resignation, but people really questioning what kind of job they want, what they really need. And I think it's great that really our society is asking itself this question right now.
No, absolutely. And you bring up a good point about flexibility. So I think the number that I've heard out there is 70 million people left their jobs in 2021, and 2/3 of those individuals left in the last 6 months. And what some of our researchers have provided us with is that if you ask somebody, how do you feel about going back into the office? Most of them say they're concerned about work-life balance, the commute, or like you mentioned, being unable to be present for family events. If you ask the same question about working from home, work-life balance is the same result. There's no disconnect between work and home, and they feel that they might be working 24 hours a day. So I definitely hear what you're saying on that front. There has to be some flexibility with employers in terms of bringing people back into the workforce as well. Have you seen any good outcomes on this front? Are there things that employers are doing to provide more flexible opportunities for employees?
Yeah, actually, a previous organization that I work for made the decision to let their employees decide to work fully remote or hybrid or in the office when they are ready to return. And that also included move to any states in the United States of America, maintaining the same salary, which is an amazing, generous offer. What I learned in this organization is the way I also lead personally, which is leading with your heart and feeling like you're doing something good and the right thing, because in the end I believe that it gets back to you. So I applaud companies that want to take what it seems like a risk in saying, we value our employees, we're going to give them the flexibility, we trust that they're going to do the best work they can. Because when people are trusted like that, and you can see the same with children, if you have children, they really do their best and they want to shine. I think the companies that are operating from fear that their employees may not perform, fear that their employees may be, watching TV at home instead of working, I think will unfortunately see bad results of that, fear. I don't think operating from fear is helpful in any situation, personally or professionally. But I understand it though. At the same time, when I was managing teams, I've always been a believer in the fact that usually your best creative work doesn't come from a place in front of a computer at a desk. So I always knew, I promoted self-awareness with my team members, understanding their style, understanding what makes them feel happy. And I will really encourage them, to leave the office early if it's to go for a run or a walk or go to the beach, because I know from a personal experience that my best ideas and problem solving has come when I do the things I enjoy doing, paddleboarding, biking, whatever it is. And so as a leader, when you start experiencing that, you really get it, and you really feel like, you trust your teams that they know the best way for them to work. And I'm glad you mentioned earlier, there is also that risk for the employee of feeling like they are never, like work never stops now because I have my desk at home, I'm working from home. How can I not check my emails before I go to bed, kind of thing. So it is kind of a double-edged sword to some extent. But personally, again, if you're a mom, for example, you may say, well, once my kids go to bed, I have some free time and my brain is more clear. I don't have, little people running around me. So I can spend an hour catching up on my emails. And I think that as long as this is not something negative for the employee, it's a great thing, right? Now, if I don't think it's okay if an employer asks you, to do work late at night or something, the employer should be willing to, to understand that and hear their employee to say, I can't do this anymore. Sometimes it's very hard. But again, I think I'm a big believer in conversation. So the more you can communicate with your employees, if you're an employer, and understand what works for them and make sure they are in a safe environment to be able to talk about that. And I think you can really come up with the most effective solutions that are win-win for both parties. So, I'm a big abundant mindset believer too, where we can have win-win and everybody can get what they hope to get. And that again, I think produces the best outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so some of the reasons, we have actually heard mixed reviews on reasons why we are experiencing the Great Resignation. Is it related to childcare issues or, like you mentioned, purpose and finding a job that helps somebody find their purpose or is just something more meaningful to them? What are some additional factors that you're seeing? And what I'll caveat that with, we have not found one silver bullet here. It's all pretty up in the air still, right? There are many factors impacting this issue.
Yes, I believe it's a complex issue and it's hard to find one underlying reason. I also want to say that I think we need to focus on educating, children, parents around also vocational careers, for example, right? So, my personal experience, and I feel a little bit limited in what I share today because I've always had jobs that I can actually do remote for the most part, right? So I think we also know that there are some jobs, if you're a waiter or, uh, a car mechanic, where you work in a place like, working from home is really not an option. So I also don't want to make it sound discouraging for maybe for people who have that kind of jobs to say, well, easy for you to say because you can work anywhere, right? So I think we also have to take that into account. And I hope that for these kind of jobs, which I know has been a challenge in hiring for many employers, they can come up with creative solution on still providing some flexibility. So yeah, I mentioned vocational career because I had many conversations with a great nonprofit in Orange County called Vital Link, who does a lot of work with high school students and high schools to help really guide children to the right careers. And believe it or not, right, there are some great jobs out there where they require a high school degree, no college, and very well paid, very great benefits, and they can't find anybody to hire. So I think that's the other component is, so if some of these jobs that may be a little bit more constraining from the fact that they may be more manual jobs or vocational, so are we going to see less and less people going into that because they feel like they need to find maybe a similar job as far as salary and benefits, but maybe they can work remote, and so that gives them the flexibility. I'm not exactly sure because I haven't interviewed a lot of workers, but I do think that we're still looking for answers or understanding research on this Great Resignation trend. Yeah. And we get it from different sources and different data points, so I'm not exactly sure. I do think it's a combination like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and what we're seeing too, some of the, excuse me, the advice that we are giving as well is looking at people's skills that may not be exactly what you're looking for, but transferable, right? So if you have a person who's been selling pharmaceuticals, they might actually be a really good fit for a sales position at a different type of organization, but the skill sets are transferable. So that's something that employers should really be looking for. And I want to kind of build off of what you mentioned, the vocational roles. So traditionally, our sector here in Orange County has a huge hospitality sector, right? And we felt the impact of that during the pandemic when many of our economic engines had shut down and people were unable to work. And you mentioned vocational. So I'm currently running for city council, and I've had the opportunity to visit many of these training facilities that really provide skills for individuals that don't require a 4-year degree, but allow an individual to get training so that they can earn a living wage and support their family. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think from a workforce perspective, we've been so focused on 4-year degrees for so long and really have lost sight of this other industry that now is looking to fill talent, right? Like talent is a necessary element, and we need to start focusing on also filling those opportunities. So that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to go ahead and transition to another topic. So at the same time, all of this Great Resignation issues are occurring, we're also seeing a demand and a need for higher wages. It's very expensive to live in Orange County and across the state in general. So those watching this segment might already know this, but here in California, a livable wage for a single adult is just over $22 an hour. That's more than the average jobs can offer here in some cases. But needless to say, many businesses, especially in the service industry, are struggling to hire new employees, and as a result, they're having to increase their wages to meet the expectation. What are the challenges that you see with offering a livable wage for businesses?
Well, for many businesses, right? I mean, the biggest expense many times still is labor, right? So, maybe not in manufacturing or when you have, when you're making goods that could be expensive, but in many of the service businesses, right, the cost of labor is your your biggest expense. So it's also logical for a lot of employers to start looking at that from a standpoint of, where would you take the biggest hit if you, increase wages or, again, I think that's when, you need to be thinking about customer experience and also what is going to make you successful. So depending on the type of business you're in, but I'm also a proponent of building impactful companies. So that's something I do too with a lot of the startups I work with, because I believe in the next 5 to 10 years, if you don't have a purpose or an impact built in what you're doing, you may lose customers to another competitor who is more, socially or environmentally driven. So, I've worked with a caterer based in Anaheim. They have a nonprofit where they train previously trafficked women into, kitchen jobs. So then later on in catering, they can hire women from that came out of that training. And I think it's very admirable because obviously, right, if I were to hire a caterer, I may want to go with the one who's been putting trafficked women back in the workforce, right? So I think more and more customers are going to be thinking like that. And I'm not saying, everybody's got to go save the world and, employ, people like that. But really think about all the ways to promote your business, to do great things. Usually customer service is key in differentiating your business with others. So I think investing in employees and hopefully paying them at least that, minimum lively wage will be a payoff in the long run. And as long as, I think the other concern is tenure, right? So how do you keep your employees? Because another if you may not, if you don't pay them a satisfying wage, what will happen is they will go somewhere else. And that's actually what we're seeing in a lot of even corporations right now, where the market is such that they are desperate to find employees. So it's a little bit of a, almost a bidding war, or, people are becoming very aggressive in recruiting talent. And so if the companies are not willing to maintain their employee or do what it takes, they will lose that. And training a new employee, onboarding a new employee is very costly on many levels. So I think, again, you have to think long-term strategy. Maybe spending a few more bucks today on an hourly rate is going to guarantee bigger success. Now, if you really struggle with that, I will encourage, if you're a small business owner and you feel like you can't afford to pay that, again, consulting with organizations like the SBDC, which has many services for free, can help you, again, be creative around how you can approach that situation, and also access resources like financial support and resources from the Small Business Administration. So there's always ways to find probably solutions that can help you as a business owner. But really be thoughtful around what's going to bring you customers and keep these customers coming back. My background in marketing, also leads me to think a lot that spending a lot of money in marketing can be good, but sometimes it can also be a waste if you're not targeting the right audience. So again, if you're making compromises in your business between different types of expenses, wages versus marketing, or other type of expenses, I believe humans is the most precious resource because that's really what could probably make a difference in your business. So I will want to support business owners who feel that they're in difficult situation with that, and see how we can help them.
Oh, that's great. Definitely planning for the future, and we can provide a link to those resources so that people can access that. I thank you for that recommendation. But unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for participating in this conversation, Isabel, and we really appreciate your insights into this very important topic. But before we end our discussion, I want to ask you one last question. So, if there was one thing you could do to save the California dream, what would that be?
That is a very serious and good question. I would really hope that I will encourage leaders, and anybody in business to start really thinking about putting their dream on a board or somewhere, like, really having that vision and thinking about that vision every day and getting up every morning and knowing that they're going to achieve it, and that there are so many people around them that want to help them. So I think a lot of time the key to success is connecting to the right people and not being afraid of asking. Do not, keep asking, keep reaching out to people, because in the end, as I say, you will find the right people at the right place. And again, I think having that optimism mindset will take you very far. I think we're underestimating the amount of resources we have around us. So, do your research, feel free to ask, reach out to people. People love helping and giving advice. Whether it's through mentoring or even colleagues or neighbors, whoever that may be, you never know who you may be talking to. And so I understand some people are more introvert than others. I'm more of an extrovert and I love talking to people, but, sometimes again, reaching out can really change your life. And I've seen this happen. So don't be shy, ask, and you shall receive.
No, those are great words of wisdom. And I honestly think that collaboration is really the key to success, right? So if we continue to work together and figure out ways to meet in the middle, so we can get things done and improve our quality of life, or just maintain and continue to enhance for all people in the county, I think that is great. So thank you for your inspiring words. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in to our program today. I would also like to thank our title sponsors, UCI and UCI Health, for making this program free for all viewers. Please be sure to tune into our second episode of this conversation in April. For more information about this topic and our discussion, visit the OC Forum website in the description below. And thank you again for tuning in today, and have a wonderful day.